What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over some tips to hopefully help you play better or stop losing against the exotic Rift launcher, because this is something that I've been getting asked about a lot ever since it was added, or just seeing complaints about ever since it was added. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, find it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below what you think of the exotic Rift launcher. And if you guys were unaware, this spawns at the black market outside Masked Meadows as of the time I'm making and recording this video. It's possible the exotic slot become kind of random game to game later on in the season, but for now it's every game at Masked Meadows. And this has 2 shots per kind of full charge, and each time you shoot a shot, the item goes on cooldown for 20 seconds, or not on cooldown, but that shot takes 22 seconds to recharge. And so it's basically unlimited ammo. You just can't spam out rift after rift after rift after rift. You do have to wait for a shot to recharge. So you have 2 shots. You can shoot a rift and then rift again prior to that first one actually coming back. And that is good to know for when it comes to fighting it, is that they do have 2 potential shots, and there is like a brief recharge period on the shots themselves. The easiest way to, deal with this or to stop losing to it is just going to be to land on the black market and get it yourself. This isn't something that I really do myself or really make an effort to do, because I don't have the hardest time playing against this item. But if you feel like every game you're just losing because somebody has this, maybe landing on the black market and getting it for yourself could be the ideal way for you to play the game, because then you won't have to deal with it since there's only one in the game, right? And I think this is somewhat decently easy to deal with, because it's mostly just like a traveling mobility item. It's good for resetting fights, but it also leaves the user completely vulnerable to being eliminated, right? When we had the Shockwave rocket launcher in the game, people could use that to make plays on you and reset fights and things of that nature, whereas the Rift launcher, you can like rift cars and stuff, but it's mostly like a traveling or an escape item, not so much something you're really going to be using often in fights. And that's why I feel like I don't have the hardest time playing against it. And my kind of thought process on dealing with this item is that I want to eliminate the person who has it when I can, but I'm also not trying to get too tunnel vision on it. And I think that is where a lot of people go wrong with this item. They are fighting somebody using it, and then that person rifts away, and they're incredibly tunnel visioned on getting that elimination, and then they're just chasing that person from that point on, trying to shoot into the sky and eliminate them. And that leaves you very vulnerable to, getting eliminated by third parties. But it also makes a lot of people tilted dealing with this item, and then that's just going to make them play worse for the remainder of the game. And I definitely experienced both these things. I've been annoyed by people using it, and I've also, gotten too tunnel vision on enemies using it. But that is basically all you have to do with this item, is just, eliminate them if you can. If the opportunity presents itself, that's great. But, be aware that there's other players in the lobby, unless it's down to the final 1v1. But you do have to be aware that there's other players in the lobby, and, try not to get tilted dealing with this item. And I think you'll have a much easier time dealing with it, and a much easier time playing games versus people using it. And this kind of goes hand in hand with not getting too tunnel visioned about it, but just be willing to let that person go and deal with them later on. I think as the game goes on and as the circle gets smaller and smaller, it gets easier to deal with the person using the Rift launcher. I'm potentially going to have some footage here from an Inside the Mind video I made, so if you guys watch all my videos, you may have already seen some of this gameplay. But in this match, I was fighting somebody that was just spamming the Rift launcher. Every time I got damage on them, they were out of there, right? And we were going up against them from pretty early on in the match, but I just kept kind of, I'll try to eliminate them if I can, but if they get away, they get away, and that's fine. And then, like I said, as the circle gets smaller, it gets easier to deal with the person using the Rift launcher, because there's less areas for them to go, and there's less loot for them to get. If you hit somebody 100 and they rift away and heal, that's heals they had to use. And if you're earlier on in the game or in like the middle of a match, there's areas on the map that they can go to recoup heals potentially, right? But if you're later on in the game and you hit them 100, the circle isn't going to be very large, so you're going to have an easier time figuring out where they went, and you're going to have an easier time closing that gap on them, potentially with just one shockwave. But also, there's going to be less heals on the map for them to get at that point. And then that's going to make it to where if they rift and you do 100 to them and they just rift, a lot of these rift players don't really defend themselves well, and they just like rely on this, right? If you do 100 and they rift away, you're slowly chipping down on their health, and you're slowly chipping down on the amount of heals they have, and you'll eventually get to the point where that person is just eliminated and their Rift launcher is on cooldown. And when you get later on into the game, as I said, the zone is going to be smaller, so it's going to be easier for you to close the gap on the enemy. It's also going to be easy because of that. It's going to be easier for you to get into a situation where both rifts are just on cooldown and they eventually have to fight you. And if they've just been constantly running and you kind of have them on the back foot already and their rifts are out, that's going to be a situation where it's very easy for you to close the kill. So I think a lot of dealing with this launcher just comes down to like ignoring it and dealing with it later, which is not typically something that I would like to do or a way I would like to play. But I think in the case of this item, the later on in the game, the easier it is to deal with. There's less area for them to run to. There's less heals for them to get. There's less other players to potentially third party you, which is another thing. If you're, like as I said, if you're too focused on this Rift player, you just get easily third partied by somebody else. I'll have a clip on screen now where this Rift player annoyed me. Like I said, I get tilted versus it sometimes too. And I made a bad play here. And I just started I was standing out in the open, basically just shooting at him when he was in the sky. And I get the elimination and it works out great. But this was not a good play to make. And I was too tunnel vision on getting this elimination. And if there was anybody else in the area, I easily could have gotten beamed and then been in a very bad situation because I was too tunnel vision on this Rift player. If I just kind of left them be, dealt with them later on, it would have been safer. It worked out and I won that game. But like a lot of things in Fortnite are just kind of minimizing risk. And the more risks you take like that and the more things you do that are just unnecessary, you know, the odds of it working out are slim and the odds of it punishing you are great. The more things you do like that, the more likely you're going to lose. So that is why my biggest piece of advice with this item is to just, you know, if you hit them like 200 and they rift, you maybe could shoot them out of the air, sure. But most of the time, you're not just going to like 200 to 0, 250 to 0 somebody out of the sky. So just letting them go and dealing with them later, I think is oftentimes going to be a better play and a safer play. Eliminate the rest of the lobby. Make it to those small zones versus a Rift player. They're going to be much easier to deal with. If I am going to be going to shoot them out of the sky, though, and I often do go for it, it's just like I said, you need to know when to let them go. One thing that's really nice for shooting people out of the sky, I think, is if you can be on any sort of elevation. So any area where there's mountains, I'm happier to try to fight the Rift player in a zone or an area like that, because when they rift up and they're super high, if you're just on ground level, it's harder for you to see and it's harder for you to track and shoot them because they're much further away. But if you're high up on a mountain, you start off like closer to them when they rift, you know, like you're closer to the sky if you're on a mountain. But also you typically have a very good view of the area around you and it's harder for them to get lost. So if you know the rift is in play or in your area, getting onto like any sort of elevations, like mountains especially, but even rooftops even, being higher up, I think definitely makes it easier to deal with. And on some mountains, it could potentially make it harder for third parties to get to you because you can kind of see the area around you and make a more informed decision about whether or not you should be shooting them out of the sky. But that is basically going to be it for this video. Unfortunately, it is a very tilting item, but the easiest way to deal with it, I think, is to just like, you know, take a breath, not get tilted, let them go. The zone will get smaller. They won't have as much room to run. The fact that the zone is smaller and you can close the gap on them sooner means their rifts are more likely to be on cooldown when you get to them, and that's going to make it easier for you to eliminate them and drain out that person's heals. A lot of times the people that are just full spamming this are eventually easy to deal with once you put them in a situation where they have to actually fight you because they've just been running all game. But let me know what you guys think of the Rift launcher down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.